areas that I think is important, because we are flying above the political issues without actually mentioning, for me, a fundamental point. All these negotiations that are taking place are not about politics, they're about economics. I mean, it's all about how you share the spoils. And to me, it actually surprises that, I mean, it's very surprising that when the Americans changed the constitutional framework and the political structures in Iraq, they didn't touch the economics. They didn't either create a taxation system, they didn't change the centralized management of the economy, and they kept that in place. I guess they found it convenient in a way of basically co-opting different political players, but it is very surprising. The political systems are not separate from the economic structures that support them. And in Iraq, there is a complete divorce between the politics and the economics. I still remember Minister Alawi now, when he was not minister, made a fantastic report, I think you were there, on the economic structure of Iraq, what needed to be transformed. And it was extremely clear. I mean, we cannot blame completely on the Iraqi distortions of the system that was created in 2003 and not consider what were the responsibilities when the occupying authority that had complete freedom and all the power needed to really change the economic structures and chose not to do that, and actually encourage the systemic corruption that then became basically the foundation of the current political allocation of ethno-sectarian positions. At the end, it's all about distributing positions and budget that become sources of economic revenue. So my question for Ambassador Luqman and for Dia particularly is why that movement has not had an impact in the political structure. They actually, some of them presented themselves as candidates, some of them were elected, but basically they have not managed to change much of the dynamics. And the question that for me is still extremely puzzling is that the participation in the Shia provinces is around 20%. And it has been 20% now, and it was 20% in the past elections. I mean, I was there and I remember the numbers. So how come the discredit of the parties and the political system is reaching a point in which 80% of the electorate is actually boycotting? So when we talk about the current results, they represent basically 20%. I mean, it is something that should be considered as a key element. I don't say that political parties are faring much better in other countries. I mean, in the case of Spain, as it was mentioned before, I mean, political parties enjoy very little credibility. Of course, a little more, but still, the problem of the financing gap that affects political parties has been tremendously damaging. Political parties need to either receive funding from the banks. Many of them get in tremendous debts during the political campaigns. Political campaigns are getting so expensive that political parties basically go to the banks and ask for loans that are never repaid in money, but they're repaid later with political favors, or they just basically resort to corruption. They take cuts from contracts, public works, real estate deals, and in Spain it has been something that has been all over the media. Everybody knows that basically that is the source for political parties to finance themselves. So the second part has been the loss of social roots. Political parties now are just stuffed with apparatchiks that get into the party, make a profession of it, they have no other activity, and they know that it's a source of employment, basically. And their obedience is to the party, because the party gives them everything. They are nothing without that. And our system, the Spanish system, after the dictatorship, was designed to strengthen political parties. So they gave political parties a monopoly. Like, you cannot do anything without a political party backing you, because you cannot present yourself as an independent, for example. You need a political party. So that means that the loss of credibility of political parties is affecting the credibility of the whole system. So in Iraq, obviously, you've talked a lot about the political party structure and the personalities, but the question that I really, really would like to ask is very puzzling, because Iraq is the only country in the region where you can actually present yourself as a candidate without any problem, any interference from the government. Actually, the government loses elections in Iraq. The standing governments, like Abadi, for example, lost elections. You don't have a problem with access to the media, because basically everybody has a media outlet that you can go to. But still, people don't want to, they don't even want to try to change that situation. Even if you can present yourself as a candidate, even if you don't have fear of being repressed or put in prison by the government, or even if you have access to social media or to other outlets. And I think, Dr. Dia, you should really elaborate on your theory of quantum politics for Iraq. I think it's a very interesting concept that needs and deserves some development. But I think it's very true. Yeah. It's very true, because with Iraq, we deal simultaneously with parallel realities. And we tend to concentrate and focus on some of them, or one of them, when we talk about the legal interpretation of the constitutional rules. And it's true, after every election, every rule is reinterpreted or discussed. And the federal court has to decide on the right of certain candidates, like the presidential candidate, and Article 70, on the majority, on the formation of the majority blocks. That is quite unique, because every interpretation needs to reflect the existing balance of power and the results of the elections. So the results of the elections are just the beginning of the negotiations for the formation of the new leadership. So the question for me of the survival game is key. When we talk about a majority government, and we all thought, okay, now the numbers add. So if Masoud Barzani, Muqtada al-Sadr, and Halbusi decide to create a majority government, it's done. No, it's not. Numbers are not what they look like in Iraq. And I think it's because the complex balances on which the Iraqi state emerged after 2014 demand a completely different arrangement. So, and I think that is my question for Ambassador Luqman, that knows as a keen observer. I have the impression that Maliki, in his last term, tried to actually create a majority government around Dawa party, but that, of course, implied that the excluded elements, some of the Sunni part of obviously the Sadrist, and some of the other political actors, basically felt that their survival was at stake, and that provoked the near collapse of the Iraqi system, and of course the Daesh crisis and what we all know. So to which extent that experience show us the limitations of this famous majority government that so many consider the solution But I don't think necessarily it's a solution. I think it will probably bring a completely, I mean, it will bring all the contradictions of the Iraqi political structure to an unbearable crisis. I mean, it's a question.